Hello everyone, hope you are fine. Today's topic is autonomic nervous system. In this topic, I will cover basic concepts, neurotransmitters, and drugs acting on the nervous system. My name is Tokir Ahmed, and here is my contact detail. If you are interested in approaching me for feedback, just do write me. Okay, so the lecture contents are nervous system and its division. I will explain the whole division of nervous system, and then I will talk about anatomy and physiology of the autonomic nervous system and receptors and neurotransmitters of the autonomic nervous system. ANS, I'm writing here the meaning of ANS is autonomic nervous system, and drugs acting on the autonomic nervous system. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about nervous system and its division. If we see here, the nervous system can be subdivided into the peripheral nervous system and in the central nervous system. As we all know that the central nervous system is composed of brain and spinal cord. So I will discuss about central nervous system some other time. So in the peripheral nervous system, there are two divisions. One is the efferent division, which is going towards the central nervous system, the whole nervous system towards the brain and spinal cord, and efferents, which is coming out of the uh, peripheral nervous system. And further in the efferent division, if you see in the diagram here, there is one somatic nervous system, which is which controls the skeletal muscles and voluntary movements, and the other one is autonomic nervous system, which is the topic of discussion today. And further in the autonomic nervous system, there is one enteric nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, and sympathetic nervous system. So the enteric nervous system I will discuss in some other lecture separately, but today's topic is more about the parasympathetic and sympathetic system. So the like the text is also explaining efferent divisions bring information from the periphery to the central nervous system. So these efferents, which are like shown here with the help of arrows, basically these are the sensory system which brings sensory information to the brain with the help of like peripheral nervous system, and then the nervous system acts on them. Efferent carry signals away from the brain and spinal cord to the peripheral tissues. So like the autonomic nervous system is basically the part of the efferent divisions. So I have explained autonomic and the somatic system. So further, if we talk about the anatomy of the autonomic nervous system, so efferent neurons, they can be in the like in the autonomic nervous system, the brain stem or the spinal cord is shown here, where the cell body of the first neuron is shown here. First neuron, there are two neurons which make up the autonomic nervous system, two important neurons. First one is given uh, the name of a preganglionic neuron. It is cell body is located in within the central nervous system, like shown here in the brain stem and spinal cord. And then there is the postganglionic neuron. It has cell body originating in the ganglia. So this is the preganglionic neuron, like shown here in the diagram, and this is the postganglionic neuron, which is basically originating after the ganglia. This is the ganglia level. So the transmission takes place at the ganglia, and the neurotransmitter is released, acts on the postsynaptic receptors in the present postsynaptic receptors, which are present on the postganglionic neuron. And then postganglionic neuron releases another neurotransmitter, that is the transmitter at the effector organ. So this like basic scheme of operation of preganglionic and postganglionic neuron prevails in the both in the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. I will explain further in detail about this. So if we see this diagram, further elaborative diagram of the autonomic nervous system. So these on the right side you can see sympathetic nervous system, and on the left side you can see parasympathetic system. The central nervous system, brain, and the spinal cord, they are shown here, and on the right side you can see sympathetic and left side parasympathetic. So you can see there are a couple of points or take home messages from this diagram. What are those? Like the sympathetic and parasympathetic. In most of the cases, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, they innervate one organ. They innervate like in a way that the sympathetic innervation and parasympathetic innervation, they both are there for any organ. For example, in this case, eye, sympathetic is also innervating and parasympathetic is also innervating, but they can have different effect, but they are the opposing effect. So like the other salivary glands, bronchioles, heart, liver, stomach, GIT, and bladder, all these organs, they receive sympathetic nervous system as well as parasympathetic. But the difference is that they usually oppose the function of each other. Okay, so another difference in case of the parasympathetic and sympathetic is that the parasympathetic system is also known as craniosacral system and sympathetic system is known as thoracolumbar, because if you see here, the sympathetic system is originating at the cranial and then at the sacral area. On the other hand, the sympathetic system is originating from the thoracic and lumbar region. So that is another difference. And then like there are some sympathetic ganglias. So in case of like the sympathetic system, the ganglia are close to the spinal cord, like shown here. The sympathetic ganglias, they are present close to the spinal cord. But in case of parasympathetic system, the ganglia is usually close to the organ or like present in the organ. So that is another difference. Okay, so now further talking about the function of the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic system. Sympathetic nervous system, as you all know, that it is also known as fight and flight response, and the parasympathetic system is known as the rest and digest response. So you can see that sympathetic and parasympathetic system oppose each other like they are shown, and as a result, the effect on different organs is balanced. So one more difference you can see here in the sympathetic system is that when it discharges, it is discharging in the form of like branches. Like you can see that the branch, like once the sympathetic nervous system is stimulated, it results in the discharge and the effect is shown on multiple organs. On the other hand, in case of parasympathetic system, when it actually is stimulated, so the effect is discrete, because we have seen in the previous slide that the sympathetic system is more branched, parasympathetic system is more specific. So that's why discrete effect is produced, because postganglionic neurons are not branched, they are directed to the specific organ. On the other hand, sympathetic system is because the postganglionic neurons may innervate more than one organ. So that is the main difference. So now coming to talk about the neurotransmitters of the autonomic nervous system. So these are adrenaline or epinephrine, and then there are noradrenaline and norepinephrine. And the structure of these hormones, adrenaline is sometimes known as hormone. They are shown here, and this is mostly known as neurotransmitter. Uh, so the structure is shown here. On the other hand, the structure of the acetylcholine, which is basically the neurotransmitter in the parasympathetic system, is shown here. It acts on the muscarinic and nicotinic receptors. So these neurotransmitters act on various receptors. Like if we talk about the muscarinic receptors, in the previous slide we have seen that the acetylcholine acts on muscarinic and nicotinic receptors. So what are those types of receptors? These are M1 to M5. M stands for muscarinic, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they are numbering. So muscarinic receptors are classified pharmacologically based on the like specific stimulation by the muscarine. So I can talk about muscarinic and differences in between muscarinic and nicotinic receptors in some other time. So M2, they are present in heart. M3, they are present in gland, smooth muscles, and endothelium. Nicotinic receptors, which are present in the neuromuscular junction and CNS. So the adrenergic receptors, which are stimulated by the adrenaline and noradrenaline, there are two types of adrenergic receptors, alpha receptors and beta receptors. Alpha are mainly present in blood vessels, whereas beta 1 are present in heart and in the beta 2, and beta 2 receptors are present in the lungs. So here this diagram is showing you the whole picture of the autonomic and somatic nervous system. Now we can also see a difference between the somatic and autonomic nervous system. In the somatic nervous system, there is no ganglia. It means the ganglia is not present and it acts and stimulates the striated muscles. Nicotinic receptors are there in the skeletal muscle and acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter. So if we talk about the sympathetic and parasympathetic system, so these are the and sympathetic innervation to the adrenal medulla. So at this level, the neurotransmitter is acetylcholine in all three cases: acetylcholine, acetylcholine, acetylcholine. So the postganglionic neurons in the autonomic nervous system, in the sympathetic and parasympathetic system, they have different neurotransmitter. One is the norepinephrine, the other one is acetylcholine. And the effector organs are adrenergic receptors and muscarinic receptors. And like I have told you that the muscarinic receptor subtypes are M1, 2, 3, 2, 4, and 5. So these are different types of receptors, and this is the general summary diagram of the autonomic nervous system shown here. And the adrenergic receptors are, once again, like we have discussed, these could be alpha receptors and beta receptors, and alpha are in the blood vessels and beta are shown here. So then there are some exceptions in the diagram I am showing here. There are some exceptions which are important questions for the exam. So sometimes like question is asked. So what are those different types of glands? Yep. Or maybe like the effector organs where like acetylcholine is neurotransmitter in the sympathetic system. So this exception is sweat glands. Sweat glands are coming under the sympathetic system, but the neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. Sympathetic system, the cardiac, smooth muscles, and other are like all norepinephrine, adrenergic, and beta adrenergic receptor. And one more exception in the sympathetic system, that is the presence of dopamine as a receptor. So sympathetic nervous system, renal vasculature, and smooth muscles. Over there in the sympathetic nervous system, dopamine is the neurotransmitter. So definitely there will be dopaminergic receptors in the organ. So the dopamine neurons, they will stimulate and they will be released by the postganglionic neurotransmitter. Remaining, this diagram is same like shown here, the summary diagram in the autonomic nervous system. So if you have any question or any queries on this slide, just like approach me. I will try to clarify those questions. So further, finally, the last like important point in the presentation is, what are those different types of drugs which act on the autonomic nervous system? So here I try to show different classes of drugs which are acting on the somatic and nervous system. So first of all, we have discussed that the somatic nervous system controls striated muscles which are in our control. So this is the voluntary control. So the drugs which block the effect of acetylcholine on the nicotinic receptors, these are known as neuromuscular junction blocking drugs. On the other hand, those drugs which act at the ganglia level and block the effect of acetylcholine on these nicotinic receptors present at the ganglia level, these drugs are classified as ganglionic blockers. So these are ganglionic blockers. Once these are blocked, the effect of parasympathetic and sympathetic, like both are blocked. So okay, so the what are antimuscarinic? Those drugs which block the effect of acetylcholine on the post on the tissue effector organs. The like those drugs which block the effect of acetylcholine on the effector organs on the muscarinic receptors. These are known as antimuscarinic drugs. And those drugs which block the effect of norepinephrine on the adrenergic receptors in the effector organs, these are known as adrenergic blockers. So these are some important classes of drugs which act on the autonomic nervous system. So I hope this will be clear to you about the basic anatomy, physiology, and function of the autonomic nervous system and the important classes of drugs which act on the autonomic nervous system. So thank you so much. That's all for the time.